So just to introduce myself, my name's Katherine and I'm an associate at Newmella. I am a learning designer and NLP coach, and I work with Wendy on developing our training materials, particularly for leaders looking to become better problem solvers and solution seekers. Not just leaders, anyone in a we would work with anyone, but leadership is really where I think a lot of our interest lies. And I've been working with Wendy for a few years now, and we've started creating a lot more on our learning management system. So problem solving is one of those trainings that we've actually recently started offering. And just letting somebody else into the call, just a second. Oh,
it's Shane. Hey, Shane. Hi. Welcome. We just give everybody a few minutes to join, but we're gonna get going anyway, and we're gonna record the session and then open up for any questions.
Oh, how do I? There we go. Yeah. And then we've also got Wendy with us, who is, I would say, one of the top innovation specialists, if not globally, but certainly in South Africa. She has a very strong academic understanding of what problem solving is, but also a really rich experience of working with businesses and supporting them on how to become more inclusive in their culture and how to equip people with the skills that they need, from the cognitive skills, emotional skills, and also the practical skills that they need to become better problem solvers. So today's session, we're going to look at why we decided that problem solving is what the work that we want to do, and why we think it's important. And we're also going to talk about what problem solving is. And then after that, we'll look at what steps can we take to become better problem solvers. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a second. Present Teams. Okay, it's just loading. Give me a second. So why problem solving? Why are you passionate about problem solving? And what are your problem solving strengths and challenges? So in a minute, I'll also ask the rest of the participants what their thoughts are. But for myself, why am I passionate about problem solving? Well, I don't know about you, but in the last few years, the world has become increasingly more complicated. COVID really threw a spanner in the works, and my life personally and also professionally changed immensely. So problem solving for me has become really a necessity. And I find it so empowering to have the problem solving skills that we also teach through our Newmella trainings, because it allows me to think about the world and not be so fearful about it, but to actually feel like, okay, this is a problem. It could be a wicked problem, but I have the toolkit I need to be able to solve this. So it gives me a sense, I approach things with more curiosity than with fear, or with this element of feeling like I can get myself out of a situation and not needing, I'm feeling empowered in that way. And certainly we all have different strengths with problem solving. And I would say mine are taking, I'm not very, my interest or maybe my skill set is not so much in figuring out what the problem is, but to be presented with a problem and to identify what are the patterns that are happening there, and start to bring all those patterns and seeing how they fit together. So I'm not quite at the beginning of the problem solving process. I'm more identifying the patterns and seeing the relationships between things. And then my other strengths come right at the end of problem solving. I think I'm quite comfortable with prototyping and testing the practical things. I'm quite an organized person. I like things to be very structured. So I would say that's where I fit in with problem solving. Let's hear from you, Wendy. Why are you passionate, and what are your strengths as a problem solver?
Yeah, I'd say why I'm so passionate about problem solving is that I'm really passionate about self-emancipation of both myself and enabling and inspiring others to emancipate themselves. And the problem solving tools, especially design thinking, which is such a fantastic frame because it's got a combination of emotive, cognitive, and practical skills. And once you understand the design thinking process and once you're taught it in depth, it really does emancipate you where you are able to think differently. You're able to shift your paradigm. You're able to solve more challenges instead of waiting for somebody. So instead of waiting for a boss, waiting for a leader in any kind of environment to come through and save you, you now have a frame to be able to apply that to whatever challenges that you are facing. So for me, that's just, it's a personal thing that I'm just very passionate about human potential. I believe every human is wonderfully and uniquely made, and every human has got God-given gifts and abilities, and their task on this earth is to understand them and to unlock them. And the tools and the programs that we actually utilize at Newmella are all geared around that. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work that we actually do and all of the activities that we're involved with as a business. And then in terms of my strengths, I'm an abstract thinker. And so if you look at design thinking, which has got 8 different, sub-stages in it, my biggest strength is interpreting data. So I love interpreting data and figuring out a system, a structure, or a process. And then my secondary skill set is in refining that and going, okay, well, what is technologically feasible, financially viable? What's a good business model? But those are only 2 of the 8 stages of design thinking. So I actually have a lot of challenges in design thinking, and that's the key, and that's why diversity is so important. That's why it's so important to know yourself, so that you know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, so you know where do you fit in the design thinking process, what are your strengths, and where do you need to mitigate a weakness, or where do you need to bring in a colleague who's got a strength. So Kate's our learning specialist at Newmella, and she's very detail orientated, which is fantastic because that's great for me as an abstract thinker. So I'm great at conceptualizing things, but then Kate, bless her, she's the one who actually brings it into reality. And I mean, the manuals that she creates just blow my mind. I could never create the manuals that Kate actually creates. So yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. So before I ask the others on the call if they'd like to share, I think it's worth just having a look at what we've been talking about, that design thinking process. We've mentioned it a couple of times. And design thinking is a thinking frame that we can use for problem solving. So it's a framework that we can use to contain our problem solving process. And it involves various different steps, and each of these steps requires different cognitive, emotional, and practical skills. So what Wendy's just mentioned is she's good at interpreting the problem, defining the user's needs, and then and defining that. And then, as I mentioned, I'm better on the prototyping and testing front. And I was thinking about Newmella, Wendy, and what aspect, where do we lack here? Like what in terms of our team? And I was thinking maybe 5, that out of the box thinking.
Yeah.
For me, I get it. I get an idea, and then I'm just excited to create it. I don't necessarily come up with multiple ideas before creating something. So yeah, something for us to think about. So just going back to those questions there, would anyone on the call like to share? Why are you passionate about problem solving, and what are your strengths as a problem solver?
Sure. Yeah, look, I think I'm passionate about it because from a behavioral aspect, I'm more blue analytical thinking traditionally, and it's helped me quite a bit. But at the point where I'm now, you kind of get frustrated when you sit in a room and you kind of have to think with this analytical mindset through a lengthy process, and you just can't get to that point where you can conclude on this is the solution to the problem, right? So it kind of sometimes feels frustrating to not reach that human potential that it's there, but you can't get yourself to just have that abstract thinking or get outside of that box, right? Although you want to. So I would really like to understand or learn how to get out of that fixed mindset, right? Where you just can't escape from a routine or behavioral pattern or thinking pattern that you've developed over a period of time. So that's the passionate part. But the strength part is, I think, that analytical ability, right? So it kind of, at the right time, in the right circumstances, it's very good to have that analytical thinking, to see all the perspectives and see all the possibilities, and you go through a little bit of a logical process to get to a point. But the fast pace of how things are being developed over time is kind of hindering that analytical process a little bit, because you don't always have the luxury of time to solve the problem, right? So it's an interesting conundrum for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Quentin. So many relevant points that you raised there. Like, how do we tap into different types of thinking, and how do we do that fluently and with confidence, going from analytical thinking to maybe critical thinking to systems thinking, to all the different types of thinking. So by understanding what it is at each stage of the problem solving process, what type of thinking is involved, by building that awareness, we can understand, okay, this is a strength, or this is an area that I need to maybe develop. So one of the things that we looked at actually earlier today in a workshop on problem solving was the difference between different types of thinking. So we use thinking as a very general word, but actually there's so much going on when we break it down into different mental processes. So, for example, if you work in finance, probably you spend a lot of time hypothesizing, predicting, anticipating, reasoning. You probably do a lot of inferring. Or if you're working in a very senior level, maybe at an executive level, you'll presumably do quite a lot of holistic thinking, looking at processes and patterns, so that's systems thinking. Or maybe you are in tech and you do a lot of prototyping. And so as we heard earlier today from a tech team, they mentioned that they do a lot of doubting and questioning and considering, because that's an essential part of their prototyping and testing process. So thinking is not just our first responses, our automatic responses. In fact, that's not great for problem solving. Rather, it's this system two thinking, this deep thinking, this questioning, this learning, this doubting that we really need for problem solving. Anything you'd like to add there, Wendy, on the different types of thinking?
No, I think that's perfect. I think the next, if we're able to, I think in today's session, because this is such a big topic, and obviously to try fit the topic into a short time period and also allow time for engagement is a challenge. And I think if we can cover the thinking spectrum, if we can cover conscious and unconscious thinking, and then if we can touch on a little bit of the NLP aspects in terms of our filters, our frames, the reticular activating system, the frontal lobe, and then just go into a broad overview of design thinking. I think that's it's going to give you a perfect big picture view of the complexity, but also simplicity behind problem solving.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Wendy. So as Wendy mentioned, thinking as a conscious act is what's required for problem solving. So on the one hand, we have that unconscious thinking, which is all that programmed, automatic ways of thinking. And it often comes from, well, it's based on the fact that our brains need to process things really quickly. So we are hardwired to find the quickest way to do that. And that's not great for problem solving. Why do you think that is, that we need to have more conscious thinking rather than unconscious thinking if we want to be effective problem solvers? Any thoughts from anyone on the call?
I think you're
Well,
just going to have to
consciousness
ask
is an
somebody.
awareness, right? There needs to be some awareness. So when you're conscious about something, you create an awareness of that problem.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add there, Wendy, on why it's so important to go beyond our unconscious thinking if we want to become effective problem solvers?
Well, again, when you are operating in a program, so you've got your three main parts of your brain are your your frontal lobe, your neocortex, where you innovate from. You've got your limbic system, which is considered your emotional center, your reptilian brain. You've got your cerebellum. So now your cerebellum is where your unconscious programs are. So when you're wanting to innovate, you're wanting to innovate from your frontal lobe, that seat of expansion. When you are in unconscious programs, unconscious thinking, you're doing things by repetition. So once you do things over and over again, it becomes a program, it becomes a habit. Your brain is geared that way. So your brain is geared to save you energy. So it means that if you think a thought about yourself over and again, or you think a thought about business or about a colleague or anything in particular, or you do something, make coffee as soon as you wake up, or you drive to work a certain route every single day, it eventually becomes an unconscious program to save you energy, right? So that's why you arrive at work sometimes and you go like, okay, how did I get you? Or you just go, did I take my vitamins or did I not? Or whatever you've got, that these unconscious programs. And that's also, why we have these biases and so forth. So it's just important that when you're trying to problem solve or when you're trying to innovate, you're wanting to innovate or problem solve consciously, so that you are stepping outside of those programs. And then in terms of conscious thinking, as per the previous slide that Kate showed you, thinking operates on a spectrum. There are lots of different types of thinking. And then you also have thinking frames. So, design thinking is considered, or at least I would consider design thinking a thinking frame. So design thinking as a frame contains emotive skills, it contains practical skills, and it contains cognitive thinking skills. And then you've got systems thinking, which is again a thinking frame, because when you want to see a system, you've got to apply systemic thinking, which means analyzing and synthesizing. So even creative thinking could be a thinking frame, because creative thinking is it's an umbrella term. There are different types of thinking that fall under creative thinking. So, and then, as I say, this thinking spectrum, these are all the different types of thinking. So it's just important. I mean, today is about you just having the awareness, and then obviously from that awareness, starting to apply conscious thought to going, okay, am I in an unconscious program? Am I reacting? Well, then I'm not in my frontal lobe. Okay, let me open up my frame. Let me go into my frontal lobe. Okay, what type of thinking do I want to choose? Do I want to go into detail and analyze? Do I want to go out the box and go divergent? Do I want to think laterally? And you can almost start to paint by numbers. So you can go, okay, what type of thinking is going to be best in this situation? Or hold on a second, what types have I utilized and what other types do I have in my toolkit that maybe I could apply to this problem? So it's just learning this spectrum.
Thanks, Wendy. So for those on the call, which of these thinking types do you use most regularly? What comes into your day-to-day? What about for you, Quentin?
I think mine is questioning, mostly, because there's a lot of uncertainty in our world, in what we deal with. So you have to try and understand. So we provide services. So it's in order to understand our client's problem, we need to ask questions and explore and probe and all of those things. So I think questioning, yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. And does that come naturally to you, that type of thinking?
For me, yes, because of the analytical side as well, and having to understand. So in order to understand, we follow that layer process where it's listen, acknowledge, respond, and explore. So you have to listen, acknowledge, you respond, and then you ask a lot of questions in order to validate those responses. So yes, it kind of comes naturally in my world, I think. Well, I hope.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, as you can see, problem solving requires a range of different thinking types. but it also requires us to become aware of our biases and our own personal perspective of the world. So if we look at this, we can understand that our filters of the world, the filters that we have of the world, determine our behavior. So this is the NLP communication model. I'll just talk you through it. So we have an external event, so something happens in your life, and you take that in through your 5 senses. And because there's so much information in the world, your brain filters that out and to make it more easy for you to be able to process that. And these filters either generalize, distort, or delete information so that you're able to process that. And the filters are formed because of your values, because of your beliefs, because of your memories, your experiences, or decisions that you've made. And from there, you get this internal representation that happens in your head. That determines your state of being, which determines your physiology, how your body feels, and then that influences your behavior. So what are the implications of this? If everybody's got a different filter of the world, what does that mean for problem solving?
Let's hear from Shane or Ayanda. If we all have different filters on the world and we all receive in reality and delete, distort, and generalize information differently based on our different filters, different values, beliefs, upbringings, what context, what has that got to do with problem solving?
Wendy, it's Shane. I think we are going to find that any potential solutions are going to be very limited within that frame of thinking. And I think the simplest way for me to articulate that is to say we end up trying to resolve problems with the same mindset that created them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's even a saying, isn't that? I think it's an Einstein saying along those lines. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Shane. Ayanda?
I think Ayanda mentioned she was just going to listen in today.
Okay, perfect.
So what's actually going on in the brain at that point? Well, we've got what's called the reticular activating system. And we refer to this kind of as a Google search engine of the brain. So because there's so much information coming in, your reticular activating system lets through only some information so that you're able to process it. So it's only about 40 bits per second of that 11 million that is coming through. So for example, if you learn something new, for example, if you're learning a language and you learn a new word, suddenly you'll start hearing that word everywhere. Or Wendy's example is when she got a new car, suddenly she could see that car everywhere. So your reticular activating system plays a role in helping you navigate the world, but it's similar to what we've seen here with this diagram. It can also influence what we see of the problem. Anything you'd like to add there about the RAS, Wendy?
It's just I think the most important thing with this slide, without going into too much detail, is to understand that none of us sees reality, that truly reality is based on our perception. Just our neurology is not able to see all of reality, because if we saw all of reality, we'd be too overwhelmed. So we're always going to be filtering our reality around us. And that's why, well, one of the many reasons why diversity is so critical to innovation is that when you've got different, diverse individuals in a room, they've got different views, different perspectives. We saw the previous slide, we've got different upbringings, different filters, and plus our reticular activating system is filtering our reality differently. So the more diverse views you have, the richer your thinking, the richer your skill sets, the richer your ideas, and the better able you are to accelerate innovation. The challenge is to truly harness all those diverse skill sets. You need inclusion within an environment. And inclusion is very much, it rests on psychological safety. It rests on how people feel appreciated, they feel valued, their voices are heard, how much belonging there is within an environment. And that's actually quite a complex thing, which is a different conversation. And then you've also got another aspect to inclusion, in that you need to be able to accept yourself before you accept another, because you've got to learn to open up your frame. I think that's probably the most important thing with problem solving, and in today's webinars, just to understand the broadness that goes under problem solving, that thinking spectrum and the skill sets, but also just to understand that the most important thing is for you to step outside of your existing frame to be able to then open yourself up to other perspectives or other views or other realities, and thus actually then enriching yourself.
Thank you, Wendy. So should we talk a little bit about the process of problem solving, one of the frameworks we can use for that?
Yeah.
So problem solving requires you to first understand the problem. And that might seem obvious, but it's something we see over and over in the corporate world, is organizations jumping straight into solution mode. And this happens for a number of reasons: time pressures, all the demands of daily work, but also maybe not an awareness that we need to properly understand the problem before we can design the solution. So at the beginning of the problem solving process, we have that defining and analyzing the problem. And from there, we start unpacking it. What are the different alternatives? Which one is the best? And which one are we going to prototype and test out? So we've got the problem domain and the solution domain. And as I mentioned to you before, there are these 8 different steps in the design thinking process that each require its own cognitive, emotional, and practical skills. Wendy, could you talk to us a little bit about that? What is required at each stage?
Yeah. So if you look at, so which of those stages would you think are the emotive skill sets? Which are the emotive skill sets? Shane, do you want to hazard a guess?
Sure. Certainly, perhaps the first and the second.
Yeah, 100%. Perfect. And then which would be the cognitive skill sets?
Yeah, 3 and 4.
Yeah. 3, 4, and then 5 and 6. Perfect. And then obviously by process of elimination, your practical skill sets are your prototyping and your testing. So all of us, every single human, if you look at these 8 stages, every human has got a superpower in one stage and then a secondary power in another stage. And that's every human. So no one human can actually fulfill the, well, not at a, you can fulfill it absolutely, but not at its highest level without diversity. So for me, my superpower is interpreting, and then my secondary power is refining, but it means that I don't have a natural skill set. I can apply myself to the other stages, but it's not a natural skill set. So I've either got to plug in, other individuals like a Kate to be able to do other portions, to be able to accelerate innovation, or I need to be able to apply myself as best as I'm able to. So that first step of design thinking, and this is why, I mean, normally before we do any problem solving training with organizations, we actually do emotional intelligence training first, because that connect and that empathize, you require high levels of emotional intelligence to be able to do that. So your connecting is really getting into rapport with that stakeholder, really just matching and mirroring what they are saying, what they are doing. So I call that calibrating. So you calibrate on them. So it's an unconscious process. And I mean, it's actually used in sales as well, because you form an unconscious connection with that individual when you start to connect with them. So it's like, for example, I talk very fast. So if I'm sitting with a stakeholder who talks slowly, then I've got to calibrate on them, which means slow down my communication speed and start to match and mirror them, start to repeat their words out to them, which Chris Voss uses as a negotiation tactic. He was with the FBI. You repeat their words. And then once you've built enough connection, you start to then empathize. And empathizing, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I'm called to action as such. I mean, compassion is more a call to action. Empathy is more, do I see the world through their eyes? Do I feel what they're feeling? Do I hear what they're hearing? So it's just really trying to understand somebody's lens of the world. And especially because we have so many biases. And this is so important with innovating, because we innovate normally from boardrooms. And we go into boardroom and we have these brainstorming sessions, but nobody's actually taken the time to really sit with the consumer or really sit with the stakeholder and really connect with them and actually empathize and understand what their needs are. So it's just, and normally empathizing, the skill set that goes under empathizing is one that we actually lack a lot in corporate, which is active listening. So most of us, we listen to, to respond. We don't actually listen to understand. So active listening is not easy. And we literally, with executives, we role play active listening skills. It's really funny. So it's learning to ask open-ended questions instead of, we all have this predictive text and we want to assume what someone's saying, but it's really being in a state of openness and curiosity and asking those open questions, not assuming, being attuned to their emotions, being attentive, summarizing what they're saying. You mentioned ABC. What specifically do you mean by that? Asking probing questions more into something, reflecting their feelings back to somebody, and helps them to feel really heard. And when somebody feels really heard, they open up to you incredibly, so as soon as somebody feels you're actually listening to me, you're not wanting something from me, you're just holding space for me and just really interested in my challenges, and somebody just opens up magically. Whenever I used to do sales calls when I was more in the commercial space and business, my meetings would always be very long. The poor reps were always over time, because I'd spend so much time sitting with the customer and just really just understanding and asking questions, and then requesting clarification and paraphrasing back to them. So that's the empathy stage. And then once you've got all of that information, you basically then create what we call an empathy map. So all an empathy map is, which is such an incredible tool, is that you're taking what the customer what the information that you've given you, and you summarize it into what have they said, what do they think, what do they do, and how do they feel? And then from that information, you then interpret it. So that's the stage I'm good at. Empathy for me is a learned skill. It's something that I'm naturally good at. I've got to teach myself to calibrate and to open up and suspend my biases. And then when you get into that interpret phase, then you're looking for, it's almost abstract reasoning. You're looking at all that information and you're seeing the patterns, and you're trying to figure out what are the pain points and what are the goals or gains that the customer would benefit from. So what is the user trying to achieve? What overarching goal they're aiming for? The pain points, what pain points the user experiencing that they might want to overcome? And then once you've identified what are the pain points, so we make a lot of assumptions in business. And again, that's where we go wrong. And the challenge also in business is that once we get an idea, we become too overly invested in that idea. So if a business fails at a product or service they have launched, invariably it's because there isn't a sufficient market, and there isn't a sufficient market because they haven't done enough ethnographic research. They haven't spent time with the consumer. They haven't really understood their pain points. So then once you know the pain point and the gain, that's when you then define, okay, what specifically is the problem? So now you start to narrow down a little bit further. You go, okay, what specifically is the problem that we're looking to solve? And now that's 50% of the design thinking. So when we work with organizations, the most lacking stage of design thinking is that inspiration stage, which is the first phase, which has got 4 substages. So we've gone over the 4 substages of inspiration. And again, that's the most lacking, and that's where innovation is weak in organizations, because we don't take the time to connect, to empathize, interpret, and define. It's almost we need to slow down to go faster. So we are problem solving without understanding the problem. So that's why 50% of this process, so 1 to 4, is actually understanding the problem. We immediately go straight into solution mode, and I think it's just a wide program that we have, and I see it a lot in corporates, but then you're always just putting a band-aid on a problem, and you're never actually resolving the problem. And yes, it takes you time to slow down and understand the problem, but it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. So, and then another challenge is that, even as Kate mentioned, you know, consider ourselves quite an innovative organization, but we probably don't do enough divergent thinking. So because it's playful and we don't allow ourselves to be playful enough. So that divergent thinking it can incorporate lateral thinking, which is just, you know, moving horizontally, like what is a different form of transport from a car? A different form of transport from a car could be a bike, a ship, a plane, you know, and so forth. So that's lateral thinking. But we're not playful. We don't go into a boardroom or sit with friends or family and just go like, let's just be playful and be crazy. Let's not care if it's feasible, if we have the money, if we have the like, let's just be. So as soon as we start giving ideas, normally in a boardroom setting or, you know, with friends and family, they start to go, no, that's not possible. No, that's not feasible. But then you're cutting off your creative process and you don't know what's going to come next. And also, if you shut someone down, if they are creative, they're not really going to give you more ideas. So you want to just be completely playful, bring out the markers, bring out the Post-its, and have as much fun as you can. I mean, when I used to lecture innovation, we used to have such fun with the students because they didn't have as much constraints as we have. And they'd go like really ridiculous. They'd start to go intergalactic, into, you know, let's go to Mars. And it's like, and you've got to hold yourself back as, you know, the adults in the room, not to be like, that's actually not reasonable, you know. So you go playful. And then the next stage after that is the refining stage, which there's a lot of skill set with refining. We don't find that lacking in organizations at all. We find divergent lacking in organizations. We find that inspiration stage lacking in organizations, and we find prototyping lacking. So, but convergent, there's lots of convergent. We're normally good at that. Convergent just goes, okay, now that we've got all these crazy ideas, let's look at all these crazy ideas and let's look at the pros and cons, what's positive, what's negative. Let's look at what's technologically feasible, what's financially viable, what's a good business model, and then you select the best ideas from that. So now you've finished basically your 75% of design thinking. You've done your inspiration part, which is the to emotive, which is connecting and empathizing. You've done your interpret, define. You've done explore, refine. Then you go into prototyping, which is really playful. And that's, again, we like to perfect things, and we spend so much time, and organizations are so bureaucratic, and it must be perfect. But this is the Google lenses, the Google Glasses prototype. So you can see it looks ridiculous. But that's the Google Glasses, the Google Lens, that was their prototype. So get it out to market as quick as possible, because I promise you, you're going to change it anyway. So what's the point of wasting your time and losing, you know, first to market advantage, or losing that market share, you know, if you're going to change it anyway? So you get it out to market and you test it. And you go, okay, so now that it's out to market, so we prototyped it, we got it out to market, what is technological, is it meeting the client's objectives? Is it feasible? Is it actually not, once it's in the real world? Because often we assume things, but then in the real world, it's a very different environment or marketplace. And then you reiterate the process. So you start again, you refine it, you reiterate the process and go again. So a lot of the skills that go into testing are actually project management skills. So what we find is organizations, if they do test, they're not applying all the project management skills to that testing phase. So you almost, when your prototype is finished and it's that just viable product that you want to get it out to the marketplace, you want to then do some kind of plan, allocate resources to it, define who the roles and responsibilities are, mitigate your risks, execute on time, monitor and control, and then analyze, did it succeed, did it not, and reiterate. So we find problem solving skills lacking a little bit. So that's problem solving in a blitz, you know, quick session with you. But again, I mean, we do this over, I mean, it's 16 hours. The problem solving program has actually got 8 lessons. And each lesson is normally 2 hours with a learning management system, with a quest, with a manual. So what we've covered it very, very, very quickly for you. But I think if you can just understand from today's workshop, which is this is our first workshop, we're trying out a new format, and we're going to create this video and put it on all of our platforms. It's a new format we're testing out, we're innovating. So the first thing is to understand that complexity is increasing at the moment. So complicated things we can solve, complex things we can solve as best as we are able to, because variables keep changing. So the rate of complexity right now in the world is going to increase. So if you look at any of the WEF job reports for 2023 and beyond, the current reports, they're listing your creative thinking and your analytical thinking as the most important skills that you have to bed within an organization for success, because this rate of complexity is increasing. And then if you can just remember, I'd say 6 things from today is: number 1, that you've got conscious thinking or unconscious thinking. Are you thinking consciously or are you thinking unconsciously? Are you using automatic programs or are you being conscious? And then if you're thinking consciously, number 2 is thinking is on a spectrum. It's a paint by numbers. What type of thinking are you applying, and what type of thinking would be better, or what else can you add to your thinking toolkit? And then the third thing is to remember that we all have meta programs and filters that we filter the world through. So none of us sees the same reality. We all delete, distort, and generalize information based on those filters. Fourth, you also have a reticular activating system, which is like your brain's Google search bar, and you filter reality through that. So that's why, people who are generally problem solvers, they will see more problems. People who are solution seekers will see more solutions. If you're positive, you're negative, you'll see more positive, negative. If you buy a Lexus like me, they'll magically appear on the road. So that's your reticular activating system. So what are you putting your attention on? And again, emphasizing the fact that we don't all see the same reality. So when you open yourself up and start to ask questions and systems think and really try to understand something, your thinking is going to be richer. The fifth thing is just, again, to let that sink in, and that fact that we don't all see reality and that we all have different skill sets. So I know through a lot of introspection is I know that what my skills are and what my weaknesses are. And it's just important to know that we do have an assessment that you can do that tells you which of the stages of design thinking is your skill set, so that you know, and you know what you need to work on. And then the sixth thing is just to reflect on design thinking, which is the last thing that I'd like to say for today. Is just design thinking is an incredible frame. If you are able to, depending on wherever you are on the spectrum of thinking or skill set with problem solving, if you can just take that design thinking frame and apply that to any problem, it's an incredible skill set. At least it guides you through the problem solving process. So it is 2:45. So we are up for time. Do Ayanda, Shane, do you have any questions?
No questions on my side. I just want to say thanks, Wendy and Katherine. That was a very informative session. I'm hoping that you'll host more of these in future.
Thank you very much, Ayanda.
Absolutely.
Shane?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with Ayanda more. Thank you very much. Great session. I'm really interested to sort of know how we assess, especially in the workplace, how we sort of get to know other people's strengths, so that when we work with that problem solving sort of approach, we not only are aware of our own strengths, but to know who to partner up with so that we collaborate most effectively.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Kate and I are on different spectrums, but at least we know that. So we also know, she knows to ask me questions because I'm so abstract, and I know that she needs detailed information. So it's exactly what you say is so important. Kate, anything you want to say from your side?
No, just thank you everyone for attending. And yeah, we'll regroup next month for our next webinar.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Kate.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.